Can Frank Nazar and or Alex Vlasic make Team USA's Olympic roster? I'll talk through their chances of heading to Italy, and I'll also share my top 5 current members of the Blackhawks.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's cracking, Blackhawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Jack Bushman. You can go and check me out on X at Jack Bushman 2, but make sure to follow my strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey, so that way you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Smash that like button, subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube as well if you haven't done so already, and if you're tuning in through an audio platform, please make sure to rate and review the show if you enjoy what you're tuning into on a daily basis. Got another great episode brewing for you all here today as I'll break down Frank Nazar and Alex Vlasic receiving invites to the United States Olympic Orientation Camp and their chances of cracking that final roster. I'll also share my top 5 current members of the Blackhawks. And then during segment 3, I'll discuss where Anton Frondell slotted in the lineup in his first bit of SHL preseason action. Real quick though, I first got to give a shout out to today's sponsor, which is FanDuel. Go and visit the FanDuel app today and start planning those futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. All right, Blackhawks fans, on the show recently, I dove into Connor Bedard getting invited to Canada's Olympic Orientation Camp in preparation for the 2026 Olympics in Italy, which the hockey tournament will begin in February. And I broke down his chances of making the Canadians' final roster as it stands right here, right now. Well, yesterday, of course, 2 more members of the Blackhawks received invites to an Olympic orientation camp, this time for the red, white, and blue, and my boy, Frank the Tank Nazar and Alex Vlasic. So I kind of wanted to do the same thing that I did for Bedard here today and talk through both the forwards and the defensemen that received invites to this camp, considering Nazar is a forward, Vlasic is a defenseman. Definitely want to talk through both of those position groups. And then I also want to go and take a look back at both the lineups and just the roster in general for the Americans at the Four Nations face-off, and ultimately discuss the chances of Nazar or Vlasic winding up on this final roster. Should be a very fun way to kick off today's episode. And where I wanted to begin this conversation is first with the forward group. In total, 23 forwards received an invite to the United States Olympic Orientation Camp, and there will likely be 14 of them on the final roster, considering it's a 25-man roster for the Olympics compared to a 22-player roster for the Four Nations face-off. And of those 23 players, 23 forwards, I should say, 12 of them represented the United States at the Four Nations face-off. Those 12 forwards were Matt Boldy, Kyle Connor, Jack Eichel, Jake Gensel, Jack Hughes, Chris Kreider, Dylan Larkin, Austin Matthews, JT Miller, Brock Nelson, Brady Tkachuk, and Vincent Trocheck. The 11 forwards who were also invited but didn't take part in the Four Nations face-off are Cole Caulfield, Logan Cooley, Connor Garland, Patrick Kane, Clayton Keller, Matthew Nyes, Frankie Nazar, Shane Pinto, Jason Robertson, Tage Thompson, and Alex Tuch. The real wrinkle in the Americans forward group right now, Blackhawks fans, is Matthew Tkachuk, who was one of the first players named to the Olympics roster along with his brother Matthew several months ago. Well, obviously, his status injury-wise is kind of up in the air right now, and we're not sure when he's going to be able to play next for the Florida Panthers and whether he's going to be healthy enough to suit up for the Olympic tournament in Italy. And he was not one of the players, one of the forwards invited to this Olympic orientation camp. Now, obviously, if he's going to be healthy enough to take part in the tournament, he's going to be there for the red, white, and blue. I mean, absolutely beautiful performance for the Americans at the Four Nations face-off, and plays the exact type of game that obviously thrives in high leverage situations. I don't got to explain much why Matthew Tkachuk is going to be a lock for this team if healthy. But just considering, you know, he was injured, obviously, at the Four Nations face-off last year. The Olympics is obviously important in playing for your country, but I don't know how well that would sit for the Florida Panthers, considering this has now been going on for quite some time now. So it's a very interesting wrinkle in this forward group that Matthew Tkachuk is obviously going to be on the team if healthy, but wasn't part of the invites to the camp, and his status is up in the air at this point in time. But as far as the forward line combinations that the Americans rolled with down the stretch in the final couple of games for the Four Nations face-off, especially the championship against Team Canada, here's what they rolled with up front. They had Brady Tkachuk and Matthew Tkachuk both on the wings of the top line with Jack Eichel down the middle. Then Jake Gensel was on the second line with Austin Matthews serving as the center. Jack Hughes played as the right wing. JT Miller, Dylan Larkin, and then Matt Boldy served as the third line. And then Brock Nelson, Vincent Trocheck, and very interesting that Chris Kreider drew into the lineup for that championship game of the Four Nations face-off over Kyle Connor down there on the fourth line. Connor was utilized as the 13th forward. Altogether, from this United States forward group, I really do think there could be some changes in terms of the Olympic roster. While I don't necessarily think that's going to happen all that much for the Canadians, like I mentioned a couple of days ago, I think there's a chance for a good amount of shakeup in this forward group. But first, we know Brady Tkachuk is obviously going to be a part of that roster. Same with Jack Eichel. Jake Gensel is going to be there. Austin Matthews, even though he didn't score a goal in the Four Nations face-off, neither did Jack Eichel. The Americans need both of those guys to be better. Those are going to be the top two centers for the team in Italy. Jack Hughes did not have a particularly good tournament whatsoever, but I still think his skill is undeniable, and I think he's going to be a part of that roster. But in the bottom six is really where I think we could see the most change. JT Miller didn't have a very good tournament, and then the fourth line of Brock Nelson, Vincent Trocheck, and Chris Kreider, none of them were really all that noticeable. Dylan Larkin and Matt Boldy, to me, were really the only needle movers inside of this bottom six for the Americans. Kyle Connor didn't have a great tournament either, but again, I think considering his skill set, he'll probably wind up on this Olympic roster. So the players from the Four Nations in this forward group for the USA, who I think could be on the bubble for the Olympics, Chris Kreider, JT Miller, Brock Nelson, Vincent Trocheck, all four of those players are on the bubble to me. And then obviously Matthew Tkachuk's status is really up in the air. So we could see plenty of movement with this Americans forward group. And I honestly think it's a little bit necessary down in the bottom six because the fourth line was basically existent in crunch time of that tournament. And I really think guys like JT Miller, Dylan Larkin, and Matt Boldy, Miller and Boldy specifically, should probably be servicing as the fourth line for this team at the Olympics, in my opinion. So the 14 forwards that I'm going to guess right here, right now, wind up on the Americans Olympic roster. Matt Boldy, I know he's going to be there. Kyle Connor, I figure he's going to be there. Jack Eichel, Jake Gensel, Jack Hughes, I mentioned, all are staples of the team once again. Dylan Larkin had a really good showing at the Four Nations. He's going to make it. Austin Matthews is going to be there. Even though JT Miller didn't perform all that sharply, I do think his big frame and kind of diverse skill set will be important to the Americans down in the bottom six. So that's why I put him on this roster once again. I do think Patrick Kane is ultimately going to make it. It's going to depend on how good of a start he gets off to at the beginning of the season. But how can the United States, in such a high leverage tournament like this, when Patrick Kane came up clutch in the 2010 Olympics, or was that all the way back in 2010? I believe it was. My, oh my. It's been so long. I just don't know how you leave Patrick Kane, a guy who notoriously comes up clutch. I don't know how you leave him off this roster, and it's not like you have to play him on a regular basis, just mostly for those high leverage situations. I think Matthew Knies is going to be one of those guys who absolutely makes this American team despite not playing in the Four Nations. His grit and sandpaper, perfect for what the USA needs, I think, in its bottom six. I do expect Jason Robertson to wind up making it on this roster, considering how well his season went last year, and just the skill, to me, is ultimately undeniable. I think Tage Thompson, 40 goal scorer last year, 6'6", 6'7". I know he doesn't have like a huge mean streak in him, but that size, you could utilize that in so many different ways. I think he has to be a part of this Olympic roster. I'm going to go with Brady Tkachuk, obviously, but I'm going to leave his brother Matthew off of it right now just because I really, for a tournament that's outside of the NHL, I know the Olympics is important, but you just got to consider the injury altogether. So I'm going to leave Matthew off of this roster right now. I'm going to go with Alex Tuch as the 14th man on this roster for me. I think Alex Tuch's size and skill, again, kind of in a similar mold to his Buffalo teammate Tage Thompson, it's what the Americans need in their bottom six a little bit more. And I think they can get that in Nyes, Thompson, Tuch, and even Jason Robertson brings some good size to the table. So to me, I would take Brock Nelson, Vincent Trocheck, and Chris Kreider all off of this team from last time. I don't think any of them had a strong enough performance to make it to the Olympics as it stands right here, right now. Obviously, things are going to change by the time February rolls around. Start of the regular season is going to hold some importance. Frank Nazar, I truly believe, is right on the bubble of making this roster. I feel like he and Cole Caulfield, well, obviously they're two very different types of players. I think those are two guys who really could be on the precipice. And if they have strong starts, I wouldn't be surprised to see them make this roster. Nazar obviously was excellent for the Americans at the World Championship to help them win gold, was dynamite in the second half of last season, went up in the NHL with the Blackhawks. If he gets off to a roaring start this year, I'm not putting it past him, but I do think it's a little bit of an uphill battle for him, considering there's just some more experienced players and some guys who also, I think, can play more of a pivotal role down on the third and fourth line, considering their size and sandpaper, and guys like Matthew Nyes, Alex Tuch, and even Tage Thompson in that role. So Frank Nazar, I have him off the roster right now, Blackhawks fans, but I really do think he's right on the precipice. Moving to the defensemen here for the United States, 16 of them were invited to the Olympic orientation camp, and there will be 8 likely on that final roster. 7 of the 16 defensemen that were invited played for the United States at the Four Nations Face-Off. Those defensemen are Brock Faber, Adam Fox, Noah Hannafin, Charlie McAvoy, Jake Sanderson, Jacob Slavin, and Zach Werenski. Sanderson, late addition because Quinn Hughes had to pull out due to injury, and also Charlie McAvoy suffered an injury during the tournament as well. The 9 defensemen invited to the Olympic orientation camp who didn't play at the Four Nations Face-Off are Luke Hughes, Seth Jones, Jackson Lacombe, Ryan McDonough, Brett Pesce, Neil Pionk, Brady Shea, and of course, our guy, Alex Vlasic. The D pairings that the Americans rolled with down the stretch in the Four Nations face-off, Jacob Slavin and Brock Faber, I think undoubtedly were the best defensive pairing for the Americans. Zach Werenski, I thought, had a pretty sharp showing in the tournament. And Jake Sanderson, who got in that championship game and, of course, scored a goal, made the most of his opportunity. That was the second pairing, while Noah Hannafin and Adam Fox, probably the 2 worst defensemen in that tournament for the Red, White, and Blue, served as the third D pairing. Charlie McAvoy, as I mentioned, was injured and only played 2 games in this tournament. But of those 7 defensemen, which of them do I think are on the bubble potentially or on the verge of missing out on this Olympics roster? To me, it's only one of them. In my opinion, it's really only Noah Hannafin who's on the bubble. I still think Adam Fox, with his skill set as a right-handed defenseman, with his endurance, I still think he's going to wind up on this Olympic roster. Noah Hannafin, it's going to be really interesting, all things considered. I'm going to guess right here, right now, that Hannafin is not going to be part of this Olympic roster. I'm going to have Brock Faber, Adam Fox, Quinn Hughes absolutely is going to be making it. He's the one who I have replacing Noah Hannafin and kind of stabilizing things a little bit more on that left-hand side. Then I do think Seth Jones, considering he's represented the Americans multiple times, coming off of a season where he helped the Florida Panthers win Stanley Cup title. I think if he gets off to a good start this year, Seth Jones is going to wind up on the Americans roster. Charlie McAvoy is going to be there. Jake Sanderson, I think, absolutely is going to be there as well. Same with Jacob Slavin. And so is Zach Werenski. So to me, considering Quinn Hughes is likely going to be healthy this time around, I think there's only really one open spot available for the defenseman, and I think they'd like to take a righty considering the numbers. So that's why I'm going with Seth Jones. I ultimately think it's going to come down to him or Brett Pesce, likely for that extra spot. I don't think Alex Vlasic, I'm not going to put it past him, but I do think Frank Nazar is the more likely of the two to wind up on the Americans' final roster. I just think, Brett Pesce, Ryan McDonough is a guy who's represented the Americans in the past. Even Neil Pionk, right? Like, Alex Vlasic is younger than majority of these guys and doesn't have a ton of international experience. I absolutely love, though, that both Nazar and Vlasic are on the precipice of making this roster as young players, and I really think they're going to be donning the red, white, and blue at some time in the future. They're just still at a little bit of a young stage of their careers. Vlasic, I know, is obviously older than Frank Nazar, but I do think he's going to be starting to get more recognized as one of the best defensive defensemen in the league. It's just hard to give a player like that his credit when he's regularly playing for one of the worst teams in hockey. So unfortunately, Blackhawks fans, as I'm predicting right here, right now, I don't have either Frank Nazar or Alex Vlasic on the United States Olympic roster in February, but obviously things can change. And as I mentioned, Frank Nazar, I do think has a real shot. Alex Vlasic, a little bit more of a long shot in my opinion, but there is my outlook in the middle of August on Team USA's Olympic roster. Should be interesting to see how things are going to shake up over the next, 5 to 6 months before this tournament gets rolling. But coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, as I mentioned earlier for segment 2, I'll break down my top 5 current members of the Chicago Blackhawks. But first, I do got to talk to you all real quick about Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be out there enjoying the nice weather in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in clutch. It's the easiest way for you to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. And Game Time also makes buying tickets both fast and simple because prices on the app actually drop the closer that you get to the first pitch. And they've also got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying tickets. So go and take the guesswork out right now with Game Time. Go and download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps for $20 off on your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps for $20 off when you download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Game Time. Before I get into segment 2, just a reminder again to please go and smash that like button and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you enjoy the content that I regularly produce here on the channel. And also, hit me up in the comment section down below. Let me know whether you think Frank Nazar and or Alex Vlasic are going to wind up on that Team USA Olympics roster. And also hit me with which prospect you want to see me cover next on my Blackhawks prospect preview series. Segment 2 today, though, recently on the Locked On NHL network, all of us NHL hosts were asked to submit our top 5 current members of our respective teams, and then we're all going to pool it together and come out with a collective top 100 list in the NHL before the start of the regular season. But I just figured it would be fun to go through which players I submitted as my top 5 current members of the Blackhawks and just break down the reasoning for how I went about things in my rankings. And again, go and hit me in the comment section below, but with your current top 5 members of the Blackhawks. Kicking things off for me at number 1, I don't think it's much of a surprise here. It's Connor Bedard. Even though maybe his first 2 NHL campaigns haven't gone as swimmingly, or he hasn't racked up the point total or the goal amounts that we wanted to necessarily see, I think all things considered, for the kid to be the leading scorer of the Blackhawks at both 18 and 19 years old, to have racked up back-to-back 60-point seasons and 2 20 goal campaigns already with very limited offensive help around him and playing for one of the worst offenses and teams in hockey. Altogether, I would say Connor Bedard's gotten off to a pretty darn good start to his NHL career. And even though I still think, there's some things he needs to fine tune in his game, there's no denying that he is already the most talented member of the Chicago Blackhawks. And yeah, he just turned 20 years old less than a month ago. So Connor Bedard, I don't think much of a surprise. Kick things off for me at number 1 in my top 5 current Blackhawks. After Bedard, though, I think it gets really interesting, and it could kind of vary in lots of different ways. The player I had at number 2, though, was Teuvo Teravainen. He was still the third leading scorer for the Blackhawks last season, second in assists, only had 15 goals, and the Blackhawks needed him to be better in that department. But at the same point in time, he finished the season on a real high note. Under Anders Sorensen's leadership, he was much better and much more consistent offensively, especially in the playmaking department during those final 3 to 4 months of the season. So Teuvo Teravainen, a player who is still pretty responsible on both sides of the ice. I have him as the number 2 player currently on the Blackhawks. At number 3, I have Alex Vlasic, and I was really torn between Vlasic and Ryan Donato, but I ultimately went with Vlasic, even though Donato is coming off of a 30-goal campaign, obviously. But Vlasic, I still think the greater body of work the last 2 seasons, I don't think he was at his best in the second half of the 24-25 campaign, but also there was a lot of newcomers on the blue line. He had to go through a young coaching change, and at the same point in time, Alex Vlasic is still pretty gosh darn young in his own right, and he's handled adversity, I think, pretty swimmingly in his young career, and altogether has been the most consistent and reliable member of the Blackhawks. Was their leading scorer on the back end last season with 30 points, chipped in for 4 goals, stepped up and had to play power play minutes when Seth Jones got traded and before, Sam Renzel and Artem Levshinov arrived on the scene. So I just think because of his stability and the greater body of work, while Donato was still good in his first year with the Blackhawks, obviously he wasn't at the level that he was at last season. So that's why I went with Alex Vlasic at number 3, but I do have him and Ryan Donato neck and neck. And I have Donato, of course, then. Next at number 4 was the leading goal scorer for the Blackhawks this past season, third on the team in points. Excellent season for Donato, and it's not only the value that he provided in the production this year, which the Blackhawks and Connor Bedard desperately needed on that top line, but he also goes about his business the right way and just plays a very steady game and is easy to be a guy that a coach can trust out there on the ice in multiple different situations. So I had Ryan Donato come in next at number 4, and then rounding things out for me at number 5, again, like pretty much all of this list, you can go a lot of different ways with it, but I went with Tyler Bertuzzi. Despite maybe considering it a disappointing first season with the Blackhawks, still wound up potting 23 goals and was 4th on the team in points, which I know isn't saying a ton, but I also don't think the season wasn't necessarily as horrible or woeful as some think it was for Tyler Bertuzzi. And also, he never really got an opportunity with Bedard. I would say he played on the top line for a good, maybe a month at the absolute most. Never got a chance under Luke Richardson. When he did get that opportunity right around late November, early December, and through the start of the new year, he was really good in that spot, but got bumped down and then never seemed to get another opportunity along with Bedsy. I don't know if that's going to come for Bertuzzi this year. It's going to be really interesting to see how new coach Jeff Blashill goes about the top 6, but I still think, again, it wasn't as horrible of a season as some considered it to have been for Bertuzzi. So that's why I went with Bert at number 5. I will say, though, right behind Tyler Bertuzzi, and there was an extra slot on the spreadsheet where us Locked On NHL host filled out these top 5 rankings. I made sure to put an extra player right there behind Tyler Bertuzzi because even though he only played in 53 NHL games last year, I really do feel like he was right on the precipice of being a top 5 player for this team already. And of course, I'm talking about the guy I mentioned earlier getting an invite for Team USA in Frank Nazar. Could very well be top 3 on this list by the end of last season. Was 8th on the Blackhawks in points last year, despite only playing in 53 games, wound up potting 12 goals, and just the energy and the intensity that he plays with all over the ice, turning defense into offense, not being afraid to go to the dirty areas. Yeah, Frankie Nazar, he's going to be an absolute dog. And if you don't love him already as a Blackhawks fan, you're going to fall in love with this kid in the not too distant future. There are my top 5 current members of the Chicago Blackhawks. Again, hit me up in the comment section below and let me hear your top 5 current members of the team. And also let me know, again, which prospect you want to see me cover next on my prospect preview series. Coming up in just a moment here, before I close out today's episode, still want to briefly discuss Anton Frondell's role in the SHL preseason opener. But first, I got to talk real quick about the fine folks over at FanDuel. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, which is a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to already crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. And I've already put together a parlay of Bijan Robinson winning Offensive Player of the Year, parlayed with Tua Tagovailoa winning Comeback Player of the Year. To join me or go and create your own wager, all you got to do is visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Thank you all for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. For your second listen, go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where there is no offseason, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter the most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Go and check out Locked On NHL now on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, just wanted to talk for a couple of minutes before closing out today's show about Anton Frondell, who, of course, kicked off my prospect preview series, I want to say last Monday or Tuesday, but obviously I went through a deep outlook and overview on his season with Djurgardens, as I believe it's pronounced. It's either Djurgardens or Djurgardens. I don't know. It's hard to pronounce all of these team names from across the pond and get the pronunciation properly, but I always try to do my best as a host. It's not Djurgardens, it's Djurgardens. I will try to be better with that, Blackhawks fans. But I discussed where I expect Frondell to slot into the lineup. And what's great is, similar to Roman Kanserov, who I broke down in my prospect preview series yesterday, Frondell had his preseason debut with Djurgardens in the SHL just a couple of days ago. So like Kanserov, we got a little bit of a better understanding of what role we could see for Frondell when the regular season begins. Now, of course, this is just the preseason. Not everyone for Djurgardens, not everyone on their roster might have wound up in the lineup. So you got to take these things with a little bit of a grain of salt. But I did love to see Frondell playing the second line center role for his team, which is pretty much where I expected him to be. I mentioned I firmly expect him to be in a top 9 role, but more likely in the top 6. Wasn't sure if it was going to come at the center or the wing, but I'm definitely happy for him to get more reps in such a highly competitive league like the SHL down the middle at a young age. I think that second line center spot is going to be a really good spot for him. And I obviously also outlined in that interview that Scott Powers had for The Athletic with Djurgardens' general manager. He mentioned that, a player with the skill and upside of Anton Frondell isn't going to be down on the fourth line. They're going to put him in opportunities to succeed. So just confirmation of that here in Djurgardens' preseason opener with Frondell centering that second line. Fully expect him to get a lot of offensive opportunities, especially because the team's top line center, at least in this preseason opener, was Blackhawks legend and Stanley Cup champion Marcus Kruger, who is not necessarily known for his offensive production, even when he's playing in the SHL. So I do figure Frondell is likely going to be given some good opportunities on that top power play unit, like I expected, and in a lot of just in general offensive-minded situations, considering Marcus Kruger is the team's first-line center. So a really good spot, I think, altogether for Frondell to be in, both in terms of his positioning in the lineup and the competition that he's going to be playing against on a daily basis. As a 19-year-old, or 18-year-old, just turned 18 actually, in such a highly regarded league, I really do believe it's going to get him ready and very well-rounded to make that transition over to North America. Should be super fun to see Anton Frondell in the SHL this season. We'll see if he sticks in that second-line center role, and if anything changes, I'll make sure to break it all down here on Locked On Blackhawks. But that's going to close out today's episode, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. A reminder to please go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you haven't done so already, and to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way you can get the show on the go, to and from work, during your lunch break, whatever it may be. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Check me out on X at Jack Bushman 2, but make sure to follow my strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey so you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until the next episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your days. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.